Everyone. Today we will be discussing the entire dashboard of agent uh, when making an agent in Vapi. So what we will be discussing is assistant, all the settings in assistant, logs, tools, analysis, and in advance. So first, I want to go through all of these. So first, WebP has three main components. One is transcriber, model, and voice. So when you click on transcriber, for example, in my use case, I was building an multilingual agent, meaning that an agent that can speak multiple languages. So for that, I choose Soniax. There are multiple other providers as well. For that, I recommend only DeepGram and Soniax. This is what worked for me. It can, there can be other as well that you can explore. So these are the languages that you can set. Here are the models. So these are the languages that you can set. I chose English, Polish, and Russian. And these are, you don't need to change much of these as it is. There's also one more thing I need to explain to you guys is the transcriber fallback. It is that, for example, if Soniax is failing, for example, if the SST provider is failing, you can add an alternate SST. For example, if Soniax fail, it will switch to DeepRAM. So, yeah, there's also other settings as well, such as custom vocabulary. You can add to domain-specific terms to boost recognition accurately. Some healthcare terms and some other things. So, background denoising and the strict language, they both were on. So you can play around with it. So I don't think there is much in it. Uh, what I mainly choose is DGRAM as well. I like the Nova 3 model for general English. You can choose other language as well, but it will just be one language. So for that, you can just go to general multilingual and you can select multi languages in it as well. Then we have the model. I mainly use the OpenAI model. There are many providers as well, such as the Anthropic, Claude models, and Grok and every DeepSeek, every other models as well. But I will be mainly going into OpenAI. I have mainly used 4.1 because it is when you're dealing with a complex task, I recommend you going through for switching to GPT 4.1. It is very good. Um, and if it's not a complex task and it's just a simple basic task, you can switch to 4o cluster or 4o mini cluster. But main thing is, like, if you're switching to these models, I want you to make sure to test the model accurately, test the agent to make sure it is going through the prompt template accurately. And then there is a temperature. You don't need to change much in it. You can have play around with it, and the max tokens and memory and everything. So yeah, there isn't much to change in it. And then we have the voice. I mainly recommend 11 Labs since they provide very good voices. You can go to Lemon Labs and select the voices what they're providing. Since I'm dealing with Polish and Russian language, I'm choosing this voice since they have a very good accent. It's a Polish voice. And also one more important thing I would like to recommend you guys. Useful information is that, for example, if you're leading with a multilingual agent in which it is dealing with multi languages, I recommend you to switching to 11 Turbo V2.5. What it does is that we were having an issue in which it wasn't saying the Polish language in a perfect accent. It was like an English accent it was saying. So after switching to 11 Turbo V2.5, it was saying it in a perfect Polish accent. Just make sure the voice is of that language as well. And these are the stability. These are the values of stability, clarity, speed, how much stability you want in this voice. If you make it more, the voice can become more unstable. So I recommend you to leaving it as it is, or you can just copy the settings that I have. And same as well, there's another thing in WebP is that in the background noise, it is mainly set to default or office. So I recommend you to turning it off. So what it does, it depends on your use case. What it does is that when you call the agent, you will hear some background noise in it, like the agent is in the office or somewhere. So sometimes we don't need that. It's unnecessary. It depends on your use case, but I recommend you turning it off. And also another thing I want to tell you guys is that whenever you choose a model, for example, if I switch to GPT 5.2, you will see the latency and the cost price just changes. So you have to be keep you have to keep mindful of it to choose all of these models in a way such that the latency is good according to your use case and according and the cost as well. So you cannot, like, if I go to if I choose Claude and I choose like Opus 4.6, you will see the latency increase so as well as the cost. I mean, it is charged $0.1 per minute. But if I'm going to uh, OpenAI and I'm switching to 4.1, you'll see the cost switch it. The cost and latency decreases. Or you can switch to nano and the cost and latency. It all depends on your use case. Okay, moving on. Then we have the first message. For example, if you're dealing with an inbound call in which a user inbound or outbound call, for example, if the user is calling the agent, so you want the agent assistant to speak first. So you will add a message and it will, for example, the message is, hello, how can I help you today? What happens is that when the user will call the agent, it will speak the sentence. If you're using for assistant waits for user, what will happen is that the agent will wait for the user to speak first, and then it will speak this line. And then we have the agent speaks first with model generated message. So what happens is that it will generate its message. For example, you have defined a message in the system prompt or anywhere, it will say that's first message as well. Then we have files. If you have any file or want to add a knowledge base to your agent, you can add that as well. I do not recommend this method because it is not very good accurate. I recommend the knowledge base query one, the RAG one. I will explain it in another video on how to do that. So moving on, then we have the log section. What happens over here is that whenever you call the agent, for example, if you're testing the model through chat or you're calling it, it will appear over here. So you have the call section, chat section, sessions, webhooks, etc. So what happens when you make a call through phone number or through a web call? For example, if I click on this, it will make a web call. So it will show you the logs of it, the transcript, any tools, if it is any tools that are being called, everything, it will be shown over here. So if you have a call ID, specific call ID, you can click on the call ID and search it and it will show you. Then we are going to tools. Here you can add your tools. I will explain you another video on how to make a tool and add your tools. So here you can add a tool. So I added a end call tool in which the agent will end the call when it's necessary. So another is the analysis one. So these are the structured outputs. So structured outputs are like variables that whenever the call ends, for example, if you're logging our data in a Google Sheet, for example, when the call ends, we are logging the information extracted from the call in a Google Sheet, such as the name, address, email address, like all of those things. So what we want is that we want to make a structured output, and what it will do is when the call ends, it will send a server URL. Like when the call ends, it will send a server URL to our N10, and in those URL will contain the structured outputs and their values. So for example, these are the three structured outputs I made. For example, if I'm going to language detect, wait. If I'm going to, for example, just to give you an example, you can also access structured outputs from the left side. For example, if I'm going to language detect, so here we have set to AI extraction. Mainly I'm using these. So for example, you will enter a name and you will write the description of the uh, structured output. It doesn't matter over here what you write over here. It is just like a description to make you guys understand, to make the someone using it to understand that what it does. So next we have our prompt in which we're defining detect which language the user spoke among these three languages: English, Polish, and Russian. And here it's a data type. You can set a data type to anything. For example, if we are dealing with language, so we're dealing with its string. For example, if you're dealing with a number, uh, for example, your phone number, for example, you can switch to a number by clicking on it. Since I have saved it by default, so it is set to string only, so I cannot change it. So here's another section of allowed values. What it does is that the our structured output will output only these three values, meaning among these three value only. For example, just make you guys understand. For example, if we are speaking Spanish, so Spanish will not be the output since it is not mentioned over here. So if you want to add Spanish as well, so what you guys need to do is you need to uh, enter here as well. Okay. So it is not necessary that you need to add allowed values. Just to sometimes our model write something different. For example, if you are adding an if-else section, for example, if the language is in English, then I want you to log this in the Google Sheet and on our Anyten. So these can be helpful. Sometimes it can output with a capital E, and if RFS doesn't have a capital E, so it can cause something. But you know, just for safety, I can do this. It all depends on you. You don't need to do this. You can just remove it. So I hope I'm making myself clear. Then we have a minimum length. It tells you the minimum number of characters it's required to output. So I've set to 0 because I don't need it, and maximum number of characters it can output. And example output, in which you can define an example to help the structured output in understanding more correctly. And another important thing is that wherever you are making a structured output, I want you guys to attach it to the agent as well. For example, if I made it for Abu Taxi copy, I want you to attach it over here and save it. So what happens is that when the call from Abu Taxi ends, it will send a URL to our Anyten for logging purposes. So if I didn't set this part, it will not send the language detect section in our server URL. So this is important. So coming back to our agent about XCopy, then we have our scorecard. Scorecard is just for Q&A purposes. It helps to understand. It helps you understand, just for telemetry purposes, and how are the structured outputs performing. It just gives you a scorecard of it. And these are the attached monitors. It show you the performance of your agent, like if there are any errors, and if there's something any failing, it tells you that to monitor. So it's very good. So then coming to our advanced section, here are the fallback voices, fallback transcriber I explained you, and our assistant. These one, it is just mentioned over here as well. Transcribe fallback. They also mentioned over here as well. So moving on, then we have our compliance. If you are dealing with healthcare or any purposes, and you want your agent to be HIPAA compliant, so you can set it on. But for that, you need Vapi Enterprise plans. So moving on. Then we have our server URL. This is not a real URL. I just added for demo purposes. So what is a server URL? So what server URL does is that, for example, I made an Anyten webhook, for example, a post Anyten webhook call. So what it will do is that when the call ends, it will send our summary, our transcript, our structured outputs, everything to this server URL. So on Anyten, then we can, log it on our Google Sheet and etc. Sometimes we are logging it on Google Sheet because sometimes, it becomes very easier for us to analyze each calls. For example, you want an email or address from each call, it helps you understand more clearly. And it makes it easier for you. Then we have a timeout, the server timeout, and these are the authorization and headers. For example, like if I show you the actual URL, you can just use it and send your data to it, and cause some errors for me. So what you can do is that, you can add some authorization, add some, some secret key and everything to make sure for security purposes as well, send some secret headers, etc. And here is the static IP address. And the static IP address, for example, if your anytime instance or firewall ever need to whitelist Vapi's outbound IP range, you can enable this, but you don't need to enable this for if you're dealing with anytime cloud. Then we have our starting speaking plan. This is the most important section of your agent. It determines when the agent will interrupt your user, when speaking. For example, there's a lot of issues client faces, exact. Whenever they're talking, sometimes the agent interrupts them, and they don't want to be interrupted, and they should know when to stop speaking and when to start speaking. So this is the main settings. Wait, I can tell you how the long assistant waits before speaking. Set it to zero point 0.4 seconds. Then you can set to smart endpointing. It uses LiveKit. You can use live web technology or LiveKit technology. It determines when to start speaking, but it is only available in English. And punctuation seconds, yeah. On punctuation seconds, if the transcript ends in a clear punctuation marked like a period, uh, then only wait zero point 0.1 seconds. It's very fast because punctuation means high confidence that they are done. On no punctuation seconds, if it's unclear whether they finish, wait this much longer to avoid cutting them off mid-sentence. And on numbers is like special case for when someone just said a number, like a phone number or price, moderate weight since, like to a moderate weight, since numbers often get read out in chunks without pauses. Then this is also an important part, which is the stop speaking plan. The number of words the customer has to say before the assistant stops speaking. It means that the assistant can be interrupted immediately since I have set to 0. It just means that the assistant can be interrupted immediately even by a single word, like no minimum word required. And the voice second means that the caller needs to speak for like zero point 0.2 seconds before it counts as a real interruption. Then we have a backup seconds. After being interrupted, the assistant waits 1 full second before trying to speak again, giving the caller room to finish. Then we have a voicemail detection, for example, if you're dealing with the outbound calling, sometimes you will hit voicemail constantly. This is like word turning on, otherwise the agent will start talking into a voicemail box, like as it if it reach a live person, and wasting the call and possibly triggering weird end call logic. So Vapi have their own AI detection, which is generally the most accurate option. So you can turn it on if you're dealing with that. Then we have a silence timeout. If the caller like goes silent for 30 seconds, it will end call. Maximum duration is like the maximum number of seconds the call will last. Then we have an keypad enable. So it accepts user inputs through the keypad. For example, if you build an agent in which you want the user to enter a specific key to make them understand, whenever you call someone, you will see like press 1 to do this, press 2 to do this. For example, if you're dealing with a multi-agent system in which press 1 to talk to this agent, press 2 to talk to this agent, so you can enable the keypad in which user will enter the numbers, and you can switch agents, depending on your use case. So delimiter is like which determines when to process the user keyput input. For example, if you want to enter more than one number, you can set it on, and and it will tell you that the user input has finished. Then we have audio recording, login, transcript. These are on turned on automatically by default. It tells you that the audio will be recorded, data will be logged, and transcript will also be made. And this is the file format of the audio recording. Then we have client messages and server messages. So I do you remember I didn't mention you about the server URL. So what I want you guys to do is that there isn't much to change in over here. Whenever you are logging data on your a Google Sheet or your edit, and I want you to turn this end of call report only this and only this on. End of call report will send a server message that contains your transcript, your structured outputs, everything. We use assistant started is, for example, when you're calling an agent. Just give you an example. If you're calling an agent, or no, if someone is calling you, sorry, if someone is calling you and you want the agent to know the details, and their details are stored in a Google Sheet, so it by turning this on, it will kind of help. I will explain you in another video on how to do this. So when you're dealing with an inbound call and everything, voicemail is like the assistant will say when it is forwarded to voicemail. This is the end message. The user will say if the message is ended. These are like the end call phrases, and we have an idle messages that the user assistant will speak when the user has responded. So these are the messages it will speak, and these are the max idle messages that you can choose, and you can choose idle timeout. So this is the entire end. Yeah, this is the end call function. Enable end call function, and forward phone number is like, for example, if you want to transfer a phone number to someone for a human agent or some other agent, if they have a phone call, you can enter their phone number. So this is the entire description of the dashboard. I hope you guys understand. So yeah, take care and goodbye.